This is Join Us in France, episode 163. Bonjour, I'm Annie, and on today's show, I bring you a conversation with Elise on the lovely city of Narbonne. But first, let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Annie Sargent. And Join Us in France is the only travel show exclusively dedicated to helping you prepare your big trip to France. I was born and raised in France, but I went to the UK and the US for college, and then I lived in the US for 20 years of my life. I have been back living in France for over a decade now. I didn't work in the travel industry. This podcast is something I created because being a bit of a geek and having lived far away from France for so long, I was eager to rediscover my own country, and it turns out that I also love to talk about France with other people. My occasional co-host and good friend Elise has had the opposite life experience. She was born and raised in the US, moved to France to complete college. She is an art historian, and she has been living in France and working in the travel industry for a long time. Because Elise is a professional tour guide, we decided to organize small group tours a few times a year. I created a small business called Addicted to France, and you can read reviews about Addicted to France tours on TripAdvisor. To see what tours are available on what dates, go to addictedtofrance.com. On the show, you will also hear from different listeners who visited France and went to share how it went, what they learned. They want to give you specific recommendations. They want people who are going after them to learn from their experience. I call those trip reports, but I could also have called them listener travel tips, listener insider tips, or listener trip reviews. The point is, you get to hear candid reviews of other people's vacation. You know they are not fake reviews because you can hear it straight from their mouth, and we all help one another have a better vacation experience in France. At the end of the show, you will hear how you can contact me if that's something you'd like to do. And I'm not just looking for glowing reviews. I do ask people to bring up things that didn't go as well as they had hoped. In today's episode, I bring you a conversation with Elise about Narbonne, a city in the southwest of France that does not get a lot of love from bloggers, yet it has been at the crossroads since ancient times. If you've ever driven all the way across France, chances are you at least drove past Narbonne. And that's the problem with the city. Most people pass by and don't stop. But maybe they should, as explained by Elise on today's episode. If you're interested in Narbonne, you should also listen to episode 117, A Detour into Catalonia, and episode 105 about nearby Montpellier, and episode 107 about the best of Sète, also a favorite in this wonderful area of my region, Occitanie. Stay tuned after the interview to hear my thanks to listeners who support the show on Patreon, my personal update, what's happening around me, how to connect with me, and any news concerning the show. Also, the French tip of the week is back. And now, here's the interview. This is Join Us in France, episode 163. Bonjour, I'm Annie.
And I'm Elise.
And today we are talking about a lovely place.
A lovely town on the Mediterranean coast named Narbonne.
Narbonne.
Oui.
Yes, not a place I know well, I have to say. Mm-hmm. I know the nearby city of Béziers and Valras-Plage. I know those very well. Narbonne, not so well. So I'm going to learn stuff.
Oh.
It's very good.
Okay.
Yes.
Narbonne is actually just a couple of quick statistics. It's 134 kilometers from Toulouse.
Okay.
It takes what? It takes about an hour and 15 minutes to get there on the main autoroute.
Yeah, on the freeway. Yep.
Yeah, and it's a little over 600 kilometers from Paris, and 192 kilometers from Marseille, and where it's situated on the right on the a couple of miles off the actual water, but right on the coast of the Mediterranean. It's the intersection between all of the major train lines that run north-south and the ones that run east-west.
Right. Lots of trains stop there. By car, you can't go anywhere. If from Toulouse, if you're going to go either to Provence or to even Barcelona, you have to
go through
past.
Narbonne.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those places that a lot of people go through. Especially if they're traveling somewhere, like you when you go to Spain.
Yeah, I'm about to go back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay!
Or by train, because you either change in Narbonne or you stop there and then you go on. Like if you're going to Marseille from Toulouse, you stop there.
Right.
Whatever. And it's a place that I don't think that their tourist office really does enough to bring people in. I mean, it does have a lot of tourists going through, but nothing compared to, for instance, Nîmes or Béziers or Pézenas, which are major cities that are not that far away.
Yes.
Not to mention, of course, Carcassonne or even Toulouse. But I thought it would be fun to talk about because it's a major historical center. It's not very big. The city proper itself is about 52,000 people. Mm-hmm. It's the now I can't remember if it's the main city or the sous-préfecture Aude. I can't remember, but anyway, it's a city that has a lot of administration, but it's a city that has a huge history, and it's got an old city center that's really interesting to spend a day in, or a good part of a day. Right. And from there, you can go out to the beach. And I'll talk about two of the places that you can go because they're literally 4 or 5 miles away. And it's really nice. And it's Narbonne, because of where it's situated, statistically is one of the sunniest cities in France.
Right. And definitely off the beaten track because, like you said, the tourist is not very developed.
They stop there a little bit, but they don't really. It's not like, I'm going to go to Narbonne.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yes, it's not a destination.
They haven't a destination.
They haven't turned it into a destination. No. They haven't made effort.
But some of the beaches not far away are. So people have a tendency to go through it that way. But like a few of the other spots along the way, right there, it has over 300 sunny days a year.
Wow, that's a lot.
Which is a lot. And it...
Sorry, the cat just jumped up.
Yeah. And it has, because of where it is, of course, some wind. It's not the Mistral. Yeah. Mistral, of course, people should know Mistral is only down the Rhone Valley. It's not the winds from here. It's a wind that we call the tramontane.
C'est la tramontane.
Yeah, tramontane. But it has wind.
It's just as nasty.
It's wind. Let's put it that way. I don't care what you name it.
It's a different name, same problem.
Everybody says to me, that wind, that's what I said, it's wind. What else do you want to know? It's
yeah.
But anyway, it's a really interesting place to visit. Mm-hmm. And I've been there 3 or 4 times. So I thought that it would be fun to talk about a little bit. It's
not a I mean, if you're interested in going to Narbonne, you're not going to find a lot of information about it out there on the internet. It's just not a place people talk about that much.
It's very strange. It's just really not.
Did you say how many people live there?
52,000. And the metropolitan, that's the city proper, okay?
Yeah.
In the city limits. The entire area is 125,000. So it's not it's not that small.
Yeah.
It's a city like some of the other places that are really along the Mediterranean that has grown a lot in the last 25 years because a lot of people, especially people who are retiring, want to move south. So it picks up a lot of new people, partly because there's this move that's really been a tendency in France for, I don't know, really, I'd say 30 years or so, of people wanting to go south because they want to get to nicer weather. But it's not a
especially
city
the Parisians.
The
Parisians. I know this is probably going to be somewhat anathema to a lot of listeners, but French people who live in Paris, a lot of them can't wait to get out. Because if you work in Paris... Well, prices are so high
Yeah.
that for the most part, people who live in Paris have small apartments
Right.
or small houses, and it's just a very difficult, very intense kind of lifestyle
Right.
that doesn't suit everybody. And I have, especially people whose kid. So very often the parents are in the south. The parents are in Toulouse or something. The kids go off to Paris to work, to
Right.
first to study, and then they get a job,
Then they
and then
get a
they
job.
stay for 20, 30 years. And they can't. These people cannot wait to get out.
Get out, yeah. Well, especially if you come
back
from
to
the south.
Yeah.
You want to
That's
get
often
back.
the case. Yeah, that's often the case.
But you're right. Narbonne is a place people have heard of more than people have been to. It's one of those kinds of weird things.
Because it's at the crossroads.
Yeah.
So you've heard of it, obviously, but like, what's there?
What's there?
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
You have to tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, part of it is because, obviously for me, it's of great interest because it has an enormously rich, long history going back to the Roman times. And the city center, the old city center, is not very big, but it has some really interesting things to visit. So it's it's not a place to stay for more than a day or even, a good part of a day, but it's a great place to visit. It has Roman history. It has medieval history. It has a section of the Canal du Midi that you can actually take a little boat ride on. It's called the Canal de la Robine, which actually...
De la Robine?
Yeah. It's the part that connects the Canal du Midi to the Aude River, so that it actually gets you out into the sea from there.
Okay.
So it's the last.
So if you're
stretch.
taking if you're taking your boat out onto the sea,
canal, you can take it from there to the sea. It takes you all the way out. It gets you.
Interesting.
So it's a it's a separate section, but it's and it runs the canal runs right through the center of the old part of the city. So it's very picturesque because you have the canal with little boats and stuff like that on it right there. So what about the history of Narbonne? Well, Narbonne, which has been written about in many, many books by late Roman historians, was the very first major city created in what the Romans like to call Gaul.
Right.
And Gaul, I checked again because this always comes up, and then I always think to myself, I really want to make sure each time I say this. Gaul is the name that the Romans gave to this area, which of course is basically France, right? But the Gaul actually included a little bit of Germany at the time, but that's not necessarily important.
Yeah.
But the term Gaul is because one of the many weird names that the various tribes had that were basically coming through Europe and going down towards Rome and trying to attack Rome and then moving towards the west of Europe, it was a tribe that the Romans called the Gallias. And who knows why? I have absolutely no idea why. But since
it's been a while,
I have no idea if it means something.
Yeah.
But anyway, since this group, which is a major, important group, moved eventually west and settled way before the Romans did in what we now call France and actually Belgium, a little bit of Belgium and a little bit of northwestern Germany. When the Romans finally decided to try out this part of the world, they said, where those are, and then they gave it the name Gaul. So that's basically how we get to that name. I mean, asterisks and everything, it's like
Gaulois.
The Gaulois. Romans and the Gaulois. And so what happened was that the Romans... starting way back, and I have just a couple of dates because it's actually rather impressive, and I'm not big on this kind of stuff in terms of dates, but it is actually amazing. In 45 BC, Julius Caesar came through this area, and he named this spot. He said, this is where we're going to set up our basic capital, administrative capital for this part of my empire, which is Gaul. And it was right. That's what it was. That was how it was founded. And they started the building of a section of what is known as the Via Domitia, which is the major road that literally the Romans built coming from Italy, going south to Spain, and then going all the way up to Lyon and further north, as far as Metz, in fact, all the way up in the northeast of what is now France. And so he was there in 45 BC. Since he managed to get himself assassinated in 27 BC, Augustus Caesar...
But not in in France.
Oh, no. He had to go back to Rome, and you know, we have Brutus and Augustus and all those people.
Okay.
You know, et tu, Brutus, you know, and all of that. And so his successor, who declared empire, whom, you know, because up until this point we're still talking republic. Yeah, well, maybe. In 27 BC, Augustus Caesar comes through, and he establishes not only as a commercial city, but as a major military base. So again, it makes me think of all of the books, the Asterix books. I'm sorry, today it's one of those days. The 10th Legion, I don't know how many people that was, but apparently it was quite a few. They are.
But the Legion is big.
A legion is big, right?
Yeah.
They were set up in Narbonne.
I see.
So they were there. And then, 5 years later, in 22 BC, it becomes officially the capital of Gaul.
The capital of Gaul.
Absolutely.
There you go.
It is the capital of Gaul. That is really, we're talking about an empire that goes as far as Aquitaine, which includes a place that is now known as Bordeaux, and going all the way up past Lyon and everything else. And the capital is, in fact, Narbonne. Which is why some of the historians called it the first or oldest daughter of Rome, because it was second in importance to the city of Rome, and its port, which is different now because of the changes in climate, the sea edge has moved away from the actual city and has filled in some of the what was water right there.
Yeah.
But it was the second biggest port in the Roman Empire after Ostia, which is the port of Rome, which is still the port of Rome.
Yeah.
Which is hard to imagine now, of course, because you don't see the port when you're in the city center. You have to go a few miles further, and what you see is beach, you know. So
Right.
It's kind of hard.
It's not a big port.
No, it's not a big port.
I mean, I don't think like even cruise ships don't really stop there.
No, I don't even think it's deep enough for that. It's very strange. But that, of course, is 2,000 years ago, right?
Sure.
So Narbonne was, up until the end of the end of the Roman Empire, very, very, very rich and very important. And the region was called the Narbonnaise, which really is basically everything from the Mediterranean until almost you get up to Toulouse. Toulouse is basically the next stop once you get out of the region of the Narbonnaise, you know. So there was a lot of trade, obviously. And of course, since the Romans were such great builders, before they started really figuring out how to use the rivers, they really just built roads everywhere, you know. And so that's why we now have a little bit of a section of the road that was the tip of the Via Domitia that came through Toulouse that really connected us to Narbonne. And as you know, there is a route to Narbonne in Toulouse. You know? There's one of the roads that there you just keep on going and you will eventually get there, you know. That's right. So obviously that was its ancient history. It was extremely important during that time. It had as many troubles as most of the other cities in southern France did once you get past the 400s, because you have all these crazy groups coming through, and the same people, the same group of people that basically made a 90-year stop in Toulouse stopped first there, and that is the Visigoths, who were people that circled around for various centuries through northeastern and then southeastern Europe, and then came across trying to find. It was like, I don't really know exactly. It's kind of a strange thing, and it's obviously a kind of vulgarization of the history of that period. But it's like they kept going someplace and going, nah, not here. You know, it was like, nah, not here.
We don't like it well enough.
We don't like it well enough, or. We get here, it's nice, but then there's another group that comes in behind us and it pushes us out, basically. So the Visigoths were actually a fairly important people. They were Germanic people from northeastern Europe.
Yeah, and I think they went all the way to Algeria and places like that.
They did indeed, because what happened was that they settled in Narbonne once the Roman Empire fell, and then, of course, came to Toulouse, which they made their second capital. And then when they were pushed out, and they were pushed out by who? Well, they were pushed out by the Franks, who basically were the people who came and stayed. You know, I mean, they were the ones that said, this is kind of nice. Okay, we're not going to go any further, right? And the Visigoths eventually did go over the Pyrenees and settled. So when you talk about the history of Spanish civilization and culture, a lot of it has to do with the history of the Visigoths, because that is where they went. They were a Christianized people, but they were not of the same form of Christianity as the Franks, who had converted to basically Roman Catholicism. And so that was another reason why they didn't get along very well. So they were kind of pushing each other out. But then what happened was, I didn't know, that in the 700s, for a very short time, for a period of exactly 40 years, the Moors from Andalusia came up and took over Narbonne. And they were, of course, planning on moving their empire as far north as they could go. They were planning on going all the way if they could. But interestingly enough, and it is interesting because from a point of view of just culture and even things going on in the world today, the Moors or the Muslims who weren't Arabs, but they were from basically North Africa, who ran the empire in Andalusia, which is the southern half of Spain. When they pushed up, what they did was very interesting because they created an environment where peoples of all the different cultures and religions could exist in the same place. Now, there were special taxes that you had to pay if you were not Muslim. It was called a dihini, which was something that the Christians and the Jews and any other minority religious groups that existed were required to pay. But in return for that, you were left alone.
I see.
And not just left alone, but basically everybody mixed in terms of intellectual exchange, lots of activity. And Narbonne became famous for being a place of great intellectual activity, literary activity, philosophical activity. The troubadours were very, very important in Narbonne. But the Moors were only there for 40 years. They were kicked out. They were kicked back south. And the interesting thing is that even though they were chased out, that sense of community and exchange stayed for quite a long time in the area around Narbonne. And in the history of the Middle Ages, when people talk about Narbonne and then Provence, which of course is a little further east, they talk about those areas as being areas of great cultural exchange. Even now, historians will talk about it that way. So it's interesting that in such a short time, they were able to leave that kind of an influence on the area. And then, something else I didn't know, the Vikings even got there. I mean, the Vikings went everywhere. I don't know how they did it, I mean, they went up the Seine, they went down the Garonne, they went up the Rhone. I mean,
it's those helmets of theirs.
It must be those helmets. I mean, God knows how they managed to do it, but they actually came through in what year? In 859. That's really fairly late in terms of all this. And they pillaged completely. I mean, they were pretty rough.
That's why they went.
They were really rough. I mean, it's like I don't have much to say about the Vikings beyond that. And then they left. Okay, they were never around to stay. That was not their thing. They just were into marauding, and I don't have any idea what their civilization is really about. But and then, of course, we get into the center of the major part of the Middle Ages, and you have the enormous growth and importance, not just of Christianity, but of the world of monasteries and churches. And so everything, except for a little bit of Roman ruins that are still visible in the center of Narbonne, everything else that is there that you can still see is from this period on, okay? From the period of the great building of monasteries, of the building of really beautiful churches and cathedrals and everything else. And
so it doesn't have a lot of Roman ruins?
It has, no. What it has is a couple of things. It has a little section out in the air, right? Surrounded by little cafes and shops of the Via Domitia.
Okay.
That, it's right there. I mean, you just, it's like, oh, what's that? Oh, well, that's the Roman road, I mean, it's just a section.
But is it like still paved with the Roman stones
it is.
And all that?
And you can see that a typical Roman major road was made with huge pieces of stone that were relatively leveled out.
Yeah.
And what they did was they had ruts. You see this very clearly also, like I was in Pompeii last year. They created it so that there were ruts for the wheels of the wagons.
Ah, yes.
So it makes you think that probably there was a standardized width for everything.
Yeah, like a railway or
like
something.
a railway,
Yeah,
exactly. So you have a space.
A groove.
That's a groove, exactly. You have grooves on the side for the wheels of the wagons. You have a groove in the center, and then you have these enormous big stones, which in French we would actually call les dalles. It was like that. And then you have this rise on the sides, which makes literally a curb. And then you have a higher part, which is the equivalent of a walkway for pedestrians. Obviously, all made out of stone. And this was consistent. This is the way they built their major roads everywhere. In fact, in the basement of the huge courthouse that we have here in Toulouse, there is a small section that looks exactly the same. It's exactly the same. It's the same technique, and it's the same thing. It's kind of neat. Because it's right there, and you really get a sense of how important that was. And then there are a couple of places right outside of the edge of city center where you have digs that are being worked on, so you can see that they're excavating a lot of things. But they also have this other thing, and I have to make sure that I pronounce this correctly. It's called a Horrea, Horrea, and it was underground galleries that the Romans dug. It was like passageways that were underground. And
why?
Well, I don't know why, to be honest. I really don't know why. I don't know whether it was for stocking things or if it was for defensive purposes. I really don't know. It's actually a pretty good question. But there are several buildings that still have them.
Oh.
So just like there are certain odd passageways in some of the buildings in Lyon that are for another purpose because it's from going from one street to another, and this was consistent that they had them apparently everywhere in Narbonne. So that's a really interesting question. I hadn't really thought about why. I mean, I thought it was just fascinating that they did them.
It's a
could be for stocking, I guess, but why would they make it
storage thing?
Storage. Why?
But it was also a path to go somewhere. Yeah.
Exactly. It was kind of like an underground series of roads that were not obviously tunnels. There were tunnels, really. That were.
I'm gonna have to look this up. I've never heard of them.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and so there are just a few that are left because obviously a lot of the buildings have collapsed and rebuilt and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's really hard, but that exists. In terms of Roman things outside of the archaeology museum, there's a very nice small archaeology museum. But in terms of structure that is literally from the Roman times, those are really the only two things that are left. Except for
I
the
suppose
digs.
at one point it had a forum and it had all the things that you see in a Roman town.
It had everything.
Right.
It had absolutely everything. It had very often when a city had a huge port, they would have two theaters. There was one close to the port for the sailors, and I know this from seeing a documentary about Ostia not so long ago. And then they would have a theater that was closer to that was in the city center for the populace to go to. But yes, it was very, very important. So they had a forum, they had a coliseum, they had a circus, they had theater, they had all of those things that you would have in a major Roman city.
All gone.
And just like here in Toulouse.
Now, if you want to see a place that has kept a lot of that, you could go to Arles, for instance.
You go to Arles, exactly.
Arles has a lot of that left.
Yes, and Nîmes has a little bit more.
Nîmes has some too.
A little bit more than Narbonne, probably.
More than Narbonne, but not as much as Arles.
But not as much as Arles. Right. No, it's true. And I don't know why.
Toulouse also used to have all that, and
it used to.
It's gone.
It's all gone. Well, but then again, it's all gone because between the invasions of all these groups, and then in the Middle Ages, when nobody really cared about that anymore. They reused all of the stones.
Right,
to
do other things.
A lot of the churches used the stones that were built, that were used for building Roman things, and they simply recycled them. And they used some of the Roman sarcophagi, which of course was what was used to bury important people, because otherwise I think they basically incinerated other people. But they were turned into the first Christian sarcophagi. They simply recarved the outsides and really used them all over again. So there was this very strange
they just
recycling. I don't know, nobody called it that. I mean, it was like, there it is.
Yeah, but if you
Use
have a
it
perfectly
again.
good piece of stone, why would you not use it?
Exactly. Right?
Yeah, I would do the same thing.
So there you are. So that we get to the time of just, like about the year 1000, and there's a monastery that is not inside Narbonne, but is one of the major things to see if you spend a day in that area. And that is, it's only 12 kilometers outside of Narbonne.
Okay.
And I've been there also several times, and it's really, really an amazing place to go. And that is the Abbey of Fontfroide.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. That rings a bell.
That rings a bell.
I think I have been to that one,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
And it's what's called a Cistercian abbey and church, which of course now is a historical monument that you go
No more monks.
you go to visit. It has a couple of shops where they still produce some of the wine that's produced on the hills there, that was produced, of course, for centuries by the monks that work there. But it's this resurgence of building that has to do with religion. And so at the same time that they start building the Abbey of Fontfroide, which is in this, it's like in the bottom of a teeny little valley. And of course, maybe it's important to explain that this is Mediterranean climate. So it's all of the odors and the plants of the Mediterranean. You have pine and lavender and
thyme
a plant that's called cyst, which has these flowers. It's wonderful. I love it.
It smells like Provence, really.
It's Provence.
Yeah,
very dry.
You get that dry wind.
Yeah.
You get the wind that will dry things out.
Right.
And you get...
Lots of oleander, lots of grapes. But of course, it was the Romans who introduced the grapes to the area.
But that thing is, nothing else grows there because there's no loam.
It's very all, limey.
Yeah.
The soil is very limestoney,
Yeah.
and so it's the summertime. You hear the of the crickets, the cicada, and I just love
Cicadas.
it. And I love that kind of vegetation. I love that Mediterranean. So Fontfroide was being built, and then they started building this cathedral, which is the cathedral that's still there, which is the cathedral of Saint-Just and Saint-Paul together.
Yes.
The two of them hanging out together.
Nice.
A very, very big cathedral. You can still, to this day, when you visit it, go unusual. You can't do this in a lot of big cathedrals. You can go all the way up to the top, up to the tower, and go outside on the parapets. And you can stand outside and you can see the sea, you can see in every single direction.
That's got to be nice.
It's really cool to do. It's a very, very big cathedral. It's the fourth highest in all of France, which I didn't realize before. The inside height is 41 meters, which is really, really high.
Yeah, that's high.
There are only 3 in all of France that are actually higher. And it's Gothic
And
style.
they are what? Which other 3, do you know?
Amiens.
Yeah.
Beauvais.
Yeah.
Amiens, Beauvais, and
Reims? No?
maybe Reims. Boy, why did that third one just leave my
C'est
brain?
pas Chartres.
It's not Chartres, no. It's either... No, because Chartres was actually first. Amiens, it's either Reims or is it Notre Dame? Now I don't remember.
Okay.
Ooh, that's weird. As a side tangent to that, the story of I've been to Amiens. It's a magnificent, absolutely magnificent cathedral. But Beauvais, which I have only seen in photo, which is also in the north of Paris. The story of Beauvais, which is one of those stories that for some reason marked my brain when I was studying this at the university here. It was probably the last one that they started to build. And 3 times, it's Gothic. We're not talking, this is already late Gothic architecture, end of the 13th century, beginning of maybe the 14th. 3 times they tried to make it taller than 43 meters high on the inside. And 3 times it collapsed.
Well, there you go.
and so
they didn't get the hint. They just
didn't get
did
the
it
hint.
again. Yeah.
And so basically the Cathedral of Beauvais is a half of a cathedral. And it makes me, every time I hear that, I think of the cabin of a Mac truck that's a double Mack truck, the kind that drive across the western world, the west of the United States, that has two pieces, each one with 16 wheels. And then you've got the head of it, which is the cabin, where the driver is.
Yes.
And the rest of it's been left somewhere on the side.
Somewhere else.
It's and this is what I imagine Beauvais is like. You have the front part, and then there it is. The rest of it it didn't work, So the fact that the cathedral in Narbonne is 41 meters high is actually really, really high.
Yeah.
It is gorgeous. It's really impressive. The architecture of it is incredible. It's got these massive round pillars. It's still got its cloister. It's got a whole lot of buildings attached to it, and part of the buildings have been turned into a bit of a museum. So it's a really neat place to go. And it is with the exception of Avignon, it is the only other cathedral that has the palace, the bishop's palace, that was built up against the walls of the church, so that they basically become one huge structure, so that you can walk from the church into the bishop's palace, which has a part of it is a museum, and part of it is the cloisters and the court, the rooms, and it's absolutely fabulous. And I find it very funny because I'm thinking, oh, well, I guess that means, you don't have to worry about rain. Not that it rains a whole lot in Narbonne anyway. But when you go online and when they talk about Narbonne and the tourist things and they say about it, they say it's a really cool place for people to get married because you can go from the church where they have the ceremony
to the reception.
And because now the Palais des Évêques has become part of City Hall. So you can actually, you have your ceremony that's a civil ceremony. You go to the church and then you go back to the reception room. So you don't have to leave the building. And I'm going, okay, I guess that's a reason to get married in Narbonne.
That's a good reason.
It's a good reason.
Yeah.
So they're
it's
fabulous.
It's quite a production to take your whole family from one place to another.
That's
true.
It's true.
Yeah.
And then again, you have the 2 days out of the year it rains, so you never know. But besides that, the old city center of Narbonne has 2 or 3 other really beautiful very old churches that are in relatively good condition. All of these now, this whole area of the city center is now a World UNESCO Heritage Site. So it is being taken care of.
Wow.
So they have a few nice little pedestrian streets. It's not that big. You have the canal, which crosses through, not in front of the cathedral, but not that far away. And of course, people who are doing archaeological investigation know, just like in Toulouse, that the area in front of the cathedral, which is really close to where the section of Roman road is, was in fact a burial ground and a place where there were little statues in the pagan times, that the Romans would set up, because there were obviously lots of things. Most likely, if we could laser beam underneath the entire structure of the cathedral and really see what's under there, we'd probably find an enormous amount of Roman ruins left underneath.
It was probably built on the same site.
Probably most likely on top of the Roman temple, and had all of that, because that's what they do. That's what they do everywhere.
Right, and that's one of the reasons why we can't dig up all this old stuff, because there's something else on top of it.
Because there's something else. No, it's really true. I mean, it's just layers upon layers upon layers. So, and then if you walk around, you have a couple of old buildings. Like, believe it or not, there's actually it's very small and it's kind of a little out of the way, but there's a teeny little synagogue that's left from, I think, the 16 or 1700s, which is very unusual. It's just a teeny little building. There's a side street there, some narrow little streets. It's one of those places where you kind of walk around and you get a sense of history. You get a sense of really how old everything is. And then, of course, what happened was that, like a lot of other places like this, once we get past the 16th century and the war of religion, Narbonne stayed very, very Catholic, it basically goes into decline, because except for the arrival of the Canal du Midi, the only thing it has is grapevines in the area.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really it's for wine, and for a very long time it was not very prestigious wine. That's true.
This is no Bourgogne.
Right.
Yeah.
This is basically, for many years, this is your basically your essential table wines. But so I kind of made this short list of things you could see, and then a little thing of things you could do before we talk about outside. So to see, you have a couple of places where you have these very interesting underground tunnel passages. You have the section of the Via Domitia, of course. You have the cathedral and the bishop's palace. You have the old canals and the old houses. And on the Canal de la Robine, which is right there, you have a bridge called the Pont des Marchands.
Okay.
And it is from Roman times, and it is the only bridge left in all of France that actually still has houses on it. And at the time...
Right, so this is something they did a lot.
They did a lot.
Right, like in Venice.
Right.
No, in Florence.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you see it in Florence.
But the difference between Florence or even a little bit of the Rialto in Venice is that those were shops. This is houses to this day. I mean, it's houses. It's 3-story high houses. You know, It's like you can live on a bridge. You know, I mean, you want an apartment on a bridge, and in the
no thanks.
in the Roman times, and apparently until a certain point in the Middle Ages, I'm not sure exactly when. The bridge was much bigger. And now there's just one vaulting. There's one section. So a part of it was on the Aude River, and it had several arches, and all of them had these...
Interesting.
And it's still there. I mean, it's quite amazing. You know, it's really nice. It's a nice place. If you depending on where you're coming from, or if it's a place you actually arrive the night before to spend part of the day, that whole area around there is a really nice place to sit outside and have lunch.
Sure.
Either in front of the cathedral, where there are a bunch of little places, or along the canal, where there are now a bunch of nice little just small places to have things to do, to have things to eat, and then of course what to do. You can take a ride on the canal.
Sure.
You can take a nice little ride on the canal. You can go to Fontfroid, and there are very often concerts there, especially in the summertime.
Nice.
It has
classical music, probably.
Classical music. Cistercian monasteries were built to have good acoustics because Cistercian monks were vowed to silence except for when they sang. So you can go to Fontfroid, which is gorgeous. It's bucolic, it's magical. It's this very interesting little place because it's very isolated at the same time.
Well, Cistercian places are usually very light-colored.
Yeah, Cistercian monasteries were not painted.
Right.
They were extremely austere. So there was no decoration, and it was extremely simple. And as far as I know, the only thing they were able to do other than pray and and work, because they worked the land, was sing. And so how they knew how to do it, I have no idea. That's one of those things that I'm always marveled that they made perfect acoustics. So when you go in the summertime, they have these concerts there. It's fabulous. Mm-hmm, it's just absolutely fabulous. And of course, again, there are little walks around through the landscape there, which are really beautiful. And then, of course, once you're in Narbonne, once you've seen the old historical center, if you don't want to go, it's a little bit south and slightly, I guess, south, but maybe slightly southwest, the few miles that you have to go outside of the city to go to Fontfroid, you just go east and you go to the Massif de la Clappe, which is this gorgeous little area that's basically like a section of hills, because it used to be an island that the Romans planted grapevines on. So it still produces an AOC wine, a very wonderful, really, really nice wine. But it was the Romans that introduced the grapevines there at the time when this was an island. So it is no longer an island. It is now attached to the mainland, except that on one side it does have a lagoon, and it has a sinkhole that you can actually visit and actually walk down to the edge and go swimming in. As far as I remember, it's at least 100 or 150 meters deep. So,
Yeah. Not for moi.
No dragons, as far as I know, that come up out of it. I mean, I don't think so. But it's really beautiful, though. It's turquoise water. It's very strange because usually when you have sinkholes, they're deep blue because of how deep they are. This one is actually turquoise water. Maybe because there's a lot of limestone underneath. I'm not even sure. But the Massif de la Clappe is an entire preserved natural area. You can hike it. If you take a car, there's one road that takes you through it. It wends its way actually around a few hills, and you come out on the other side and you're at the beach.
Nice.
And you are at the Mediterranean, and the beach is sand beach. It's just absolutely beautiful. The only thing you have to be careful of if you go to a place like that in the summer is there are signs about fire there all over the place. You have to be very careful about matches, cigarettes, and things like that because it's a tinderbox. It can really go up in flame. But it's absolutely beautiful, and it's filled with just fields of grapevines. I mean, it's vineyards everywhere.
Right, and the beach there is probably not a very high-end beach.
Right. It's a very simple beach because it doesn't have a lot of building on it. It's not one of those beaches that's got endless amounts of, apartment buildings and things like that because it is, in fact, part of this. It's got a couple of towns along it. It's got a little section, that has
campgrounds and things like that.
It has a couple of campgrounds. But the buildings are low. Mm-hmm. I think it's basically, if I remember correctly now, because I did go there once with a group of university students. We did an outing there for a day. At the time, I remember, obviously, you have whatever you have along a beach walk, which would mean you have ice cream places and you have cafes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then there's a whole section that is just beach, and it's very nice beach. And you, of course, you're in the Mediterranean, So it's interesting because you have Narbonne, which is basically, aside from the fact that there are people who live there and go about their business in a normal, everyday kind of way, the city center of Narbonne is really ancient history. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Massif de la Clappe, which is pure nature.
Yep.
And there are places where you can hike. And we did a hike, my husband and I, once where we got out of the car. We went up on a ridge, and it's very beautiful because you can see that it's got a couple of dips in the land. And then in the distance, you see the water of the Mediterranean Sea. And then if you continue on the road, you wind up on the beach, and there's, civilization again. And all along the way, there are stands that sell the wine.
Oh.
And it's a good wine. I mean, it's an AOC, so it's a wine that has an appellation, which means that it's a halfway decent wine. I mean, it's not a famous wine like the Bourgogne, but it's very similar to Minervois or Corbière.
Okay. I tend to like those. Yeah. So reds.
They're nice and robust.
Yeah.
They're really relatively full-bodied because they've had a lot of sun. But they're really nice wines, and it's kind of a great place. And so the whole area is a place that you can really enjoy. And if you stay in a place that's either in Narbonne or on the beach, you have a lot of things because from there you can go a little bit further south, and you get to Gruissan-Plage, which is another very interesting place. Gruissan, which is a village, which is a round village, and then you have its beach, and it has houses that are built on stilts. Mm-hmm. And then you go a little further from there, and you get to a bigger town called Port-la-Nouvelle, which is a lot more like...
It's modern.
More like Villanova, in Spain. But you have this wonderful... I guess that's why I like it around that area. You have a mix of history and... nature and going swimming in the Mediterranean,
and just enjoy the outside.
Enjoy the outside, and lots of places you can hike all the way around. And one thing that's really good to do in Narbonne, it still has, unlike Toulouse, two enormous covered markets that are what they call Baltard style, which is that very beautiful glass and ironwork that was built, of course, starting in Paris, and that we had here in Toulouse, but were torn down to make two ugly parking lots. Mm-hmm. And
they're ugly.
They are ugly.
I will confirm that.
And one of them in the dead center of Narbonne has great little places to eat at lunchtime. It's not open in the evening because the markets, everywhere close. But it's a famous place, and people come from all over to go and eat because it's very
So
fresh.
are there specialties of the area?
Well, I think a lot of it's seafood.
Yeah.
A lot of it's fish. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess seafood is incorrect. It's fish. There's lots of sardines and grilled fish from the area, and sausage, like the sausage for the Toulouse, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two things that I know are really the specialties there. So it's a kind of and how could I forget? I know why I forgot, because I don't eat them. Oysters.
Yes.
Because there are oysters and mussels beds out there. And
they're not famous.
No, they're not like the
Narbonne
Atlantic
is
ones.
not known for its oysters, but they
are.
have them.
And my my son-in-law and his wife, they used to spend summers in a place right on the beach, not in Narbonne, but very close. And they would just go there at lunchtime and do some shopping afterwards. And they like food, So they'd go there, have a go, and it was wonderful. It's like this great thing. And there's a whole bunch of these little places inside the market there in Narbonne. So thanks to the Romans, Narbonne got put on the map.
Yeah.
It's a little dot on the map compared to other places at this point, But it's really kind of a neat place to go. And so if you're in that area, if you're staying or visiting, going through either Béziers or Montpellier, which is, of course, a little further away, it's further up, or coming from Toulouse or Carcassonne, and you want to go and spend some time on the sea, it's a great place to visit. Mm-hmm. And then go swimming. And of course, with this weather, I'm a bit obsessed with that. So
yeah, it is summer. It's time.
Summer.
It's the time. Yeah, I'm going to the beach, so I'm very happy about that.
I know.
It'll be very fun.
Yeah, that's why I thought, what a great thing to talk about.
Yeah. And a lot of people from Toulouse, actually, when they want to go have a beach day, they go to Narbonne.
Yes, they go to Narbonne.
Because it's the closest.
Yes.
Young people, people my daughter's age, they will, as soon as they get a driver's license, they organize carloads of kids that go off to Narbonne.
Right. They go to Narbonne. They go to Narbonne Plage. They go to Guisson, which is the village and the beach just right next to it. But yeah, it's really, for us, considering that we're really pretty landlocked, it's definitely the first access to beautiful beach. And the lagoons around there are very beautiful as well. And there are some very nice walks that you can do. And it's, of course, relatively flat. There are flamingos in the lagoons, pink flamingos. I don't know if there are any other kind, actually. Here, I know everybody says pink flamingos, but I don't know if there are any other kind.
There are purple ones.
But I don't know. In Florida, they're pink too, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's a nice area.
Very nice. Well, thank you very much, Elise.
You are quite welcome.
I learned a lot. I might, I'm going to be driving right past it again soon. I don't know if I'll stop. If I'm...
Because you're on the autoroute.
Yeah, if I'm on the freeway and I just want to get to Barcelona and to my destination, I tend to not stop anywhere.
I understand that because, you're going far and you got some nice beach down there where you're going
Absolutely. Thank you, Elise.
Adios.
Thank you, Jill Comley, for signing up to support the show on Patreon this week. Your support is very much appreciated, Jill. And thank you to all the patrons who support the show month after month. I want you to know how much I appreciate your continued support. Most donors pull the trigger and sign up to support the show on Patreon because they feel this show brings them a lot of value and they want to give back. But the way it works on Patreon is that there are rewards that go along with different levels of donation. So, to support the show and Patreon and see the various rewards you can get, go to patreon.com/join us. That's patreon.com. Join us, no spaces or dashes. I'm always tweaking the rewards to keep it interesting, both for you and for me, so check back occasionally. And now for my personal update. The next Paris tour is coming up very quickly on October 1st through October 8th. That one didn't sell out, but I'm going to go ahead with it, and I'm really excited to meet the folks who will join me in Paris. I've added some new things to this tour, such as a drive around Paris one night and a little more time at the Eiffel Tower. We're going up Notre Dame Tower. I customized it because it's a small number, and they know what they want, so we're going to have a ball. It's not too late for you to join us if you'd like to for one day or for the whole week. Email me if that's something you'd like to do. Again, the tour is October 1st through October 7th. We also did this on the inaugural tour. One person joined us for the one day, and I think it's very fun for people who don't want to do the whole thing, but they just want to come for a little bit of the time. And I also want to share a few more thoughts about my trip to the US in August. You know, there's nothing like an outsider's perspective to notice little things that matter a lot, and I'm sure you noticed a lot of such things when you come to France. But I noticed one thing in particular in the US that was really a little bit startling. We landed in Washington and we spent the night at a really comfortable hotel, but even though it was really comfortable, we woke up at 4 a.m. because of jet lag, obviously. And it wasn't time to go anywhere yet, so I turned on the TV. I don't normally watch very much TV, but what else are you going to do at 4 a.m. in Washington where I don't know anybody? So early morning news was on, and we watched a little bit of that. And after just a few minutes, by the time my husband was done with his shower, actually, I was like on full alert. I was like so anxious. And really, American news is designed to make you crazy, or to make you at least very anxious and very on edge. The way they do it is that they keep switching between terrible stories, one after the other, and they only do like 30 seconds at a time. So it's going to be 30 seconds on the terrible cocaine epidemic that's killing so many people. And then they go right into, you know, the teenagers committing suicide. It's like it's in the water or something. That's what they make it sound like. Then they go to the kidnapped poodle. I kid you not. And then a few shootings. There were several. There were... You know, it just never stops. The bad news never stops. And the way they just go from one to the other and they circle back to the first one and they never go into anything in depth. So you don't really know what's happening. You just know that it's scary. And the few times where they slowed it down and actually interviewed some athlete who had won a scholarship to college, well, they put on that big old ticker at the bottom of the screen that was telling me how there was international bits about how North Korea it's something I should really worry about, and I should also worry about Venezuela, and I'm like, oh, just, you know, I felt very relieved when I turned off the TV. So, you know, I don't watch a lot of TV news in France, but it is still, by comparison, very genteel. So there's no big ticker. There's no switching stories every 20 seconds or 30 seconds. There's no circling back to the scariest stuff. They just tell you the news from A through Z. And yes, it's all terrible stories, but they don't constantly bring up the scariest one at the top. And so... if I was living in the US today, I think I'd do myself a favor and not turn on TV news because it'll drive you crazy. So I don't know what you think about that. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm putting way too much attention towards something that doesn't deserve it. But I welcome your comments to see what you think. Maybe in the Join Us in France closed group or something like that, we could talk about it, because that, to me, seemed very different from the type of lifestyle that we have in France. And mind you, I don't watch TV news in France either, not very much. I open up a couple, you know, I'll read Le Monde in the morning and my local newspaper, La Dépêche du Midi. And I spend maybe 10 minutes on that, and that's it, you know. That's all the news I need. I don't need to know about all the disasters that are happening everywhere. Unless, of course, there's something that I care about. But if for the most part it's stuff that I can't do anything about, then why worry about it? Oh, and one more really important personal update. I consider this to be a great victory because it wasn't easy to achieve, and I have to thank my husband for getting it done for me. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is now on the Google Play Store. Now you might ask, what's the big deal, Because really the Play Store is a directory, just like iTunes is a directory of podcasts, so is Stitcher Radio, so is iHeartRadio, and we're also on those. But the thing is, Android phones are huge out there. I think Android has maybe 70% of the world market. And of course, that's divided up into Samsung and other vendors. So it's not like they have the big iPhone monopoly, but still there are a lot of people out there using Android phones, and their directory for podcasts and music is the Play Store. And so it's fantastic that they can find the Join Us in France Travel Podcast there, but you do have to be a little bit particular how you enter it. It is the Join Us in France Travel Podcast. If you enter Join Us in France, you're not going to find it. So, yeah, it's a little bit too prickly, just like search in general when it comes to podcasting. I don't know why they don't improve the search. I so wish you could just go to one of these, to iTunes and say, oh, I want to hear a podcast about Napoleon. And it would bring up episodes that are relevant and not just a podcast that has the word Napoleon in the title. Because how many of us are going to do a podcast with the title Napoleon in it? Anyway, great news. We're in the Google Play Store. And if you know people who use Android, then they'll easily find us there. The best way to connect with me is to email me, Annie@joinusinfrance.com, or search for the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook. Lots of great conversations are happening on the Join Us in France closed group on Facebook. It's a great place to come ask specific questions about your trip, and you will find lots of people willing to help out quickly there. If you have feedback on what you heard on an episode, leave me a voicemail, 1-801-806-1015. That's a U.S. number, where the only thing you can do is leave a voicemail. It does not ring at my house, thank goodness, because there are listeners all over the world and I don't want to get woken up. I will play your feedback on the show unless you indicate that you don't want it played. I create a post for every episode of the show, and you can find it by typing joinusinfrance.com/ and the episode number. This is where you can go see the list of all the things and places we talked about in each episode, the recommendations we gave, where you can see those pesky French names spelled out, and I even add timestamps to most of the episodes so you can jump straight to the right place to listen again. Joinusinfrance.com is also where you can subscribe to the newsletter. I don't email more than once a week. I never share your email address with anybody else, and I always add something extra for newsletter subscribers, so I encourage you to sign up for that. There are social share buttons on each episode on joinusinfrance.com as well. You know people who are going to be visiting France. You need to help them not fall into tourist traps by telling them about this resource. They'll have a better time in France, and they'll thank you for it. This is the French tip of the week. I did a whole episode on using credit cards in France. That was episode 99, and it's consistently one of the most visited pages on Join Us in France website. But what do you say if your credit card isn't working? Well, you say, ma carte ne marche pas, je ne sais pas pourquoi. So, ma carte ne marche pas et je ne sais pas pourquoi. And hopefully somebody nice can try and run it a different way or something. Ma carte ne marche pas, je ne sais pas pourquoi. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you also for sharing this show on social media. You need to know that I mostly rely on word of mouth to reach new listeners, so any help you can provide is fantastic. Have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2017 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.